DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams. Welcome in to DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. For those of you watching on video, and at this point in the show, everybody's watching on video, you can see I'm back in our friendly confines of our DawgNation World Headquarters studios. What a day it was yesterday at SEC Media Days. I feel like I learned a decent amount, all things being equal, considering the fact that the Georgia players and coaches no different than the others in terms of they're going to try really hard not to say anything too inflammatory, and yet there was still some interesting things to be gained by what was said. We'll talk a lot about that on today's show. I think we also have two real treats, two College Football Hall of Famers. Matt Stinchcomb going to be with us a little bit later on in the program to talk about the current state of the Dogs, especially the offensive line, the position he knows well. And off the top of the program today, my gosh, what a moment it was yesterday for me personally. I think for Georgia fans collectively to hear as much as we did from the legend himself, the greatest college football player of all time in my mind, Herschel Walker, his thoughts on the current Georgia running backs, what's going to happen for Georgia in its pursuit of a national championship this year, his belief that Alabama is a villain that needs to be slain by the Dogs. This is just a great, great conversation. We'll do that kind of off the top here today. A lot on the start of the 2019 season included with that discussion. I'm really glad you're with us to be a part of it. As DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I was walking around the building this morning in our DawgNation World Headquarters studios before the start of our show, and I ran into a guy that I know who works in the building and not a part of the DawgNation team, just a guy that works in this building. And he said to me, hey, is Media Days, is it fun? He knew I had been in Birmingham the day before, had been there Hoover, suburban Birmingham, so to speak, for SEC Media Days. Many of you saw some of our content yesterday, and we appreciate you consuming that. But in passing, in conversation, is it fun to go to SEC Media Days? Is it the kind of thing that you enjoy being a part of? And what I said back in response is that it can be fun. Yes, it can be fun to see some people maybe you haven't seen in a long time. When it comes to the content you collect, it's kind of a volume game. You do a bunch of interviews, you record a lot of video, you record a lot of audio, and you hope when it's all said and done, out of the volume of stuff that you kind of put together, you have some stuff that kind of measures up as real gold, the kinds of things that your audience is going to really, really enjoy. I think yesterday's a perfect example of that. I'm not going to tell you, I would never pretend to tell you that every single word I recorded yesterday, or maybe every single word that I may have spoken yesterday, is the kind of thing that everyone's going to remember for a long time. Obviously, that's not true. That'd be overstating the matter. However, there was at least one thing that I think we're going to be talking about for quite some time, and that was the interview that I got to conduct with the legendary, I just don't think there's any other way to say it, legendary, greatest college football player of all time, Herschel Walker. And I'm going to let you see this for yourself or hear this for yourself in just a moment. And I got to give just a little bit of context for all of this. I said this on the radio this morning. I'm on with our friends in Athens on 960 The Ref, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref every Wednesday morning. And I'm standing here really just less than a couple of feet, just a mere matter of inches away from Walker, and we're having this conversation, and other media members are there. It's not, necessarily an exclusive interview, but I am, there asking my questions, kind of in the mix of all of this, and I'm thinking back to when I was a child, early 80s, in Athens at a restaurant that's not there anymore called Charlie Williams Pinecrest Lodge, and that's the last time I was probably this close to Herschel Walker, close enough as a small child to ask him for an autograph. And I still have this autograph. In fact, it's in my home now. It's on a brochure from Charlie Williams. And, Herschel raises up that big leg and uses that thigh like a table and signs that autograph and kind of gives it over to me. And, of course, now I'm an adult talking to him in a professional capacity. But it's really funny to see how life can go and how things can just kind of evolve over time. And, Herschel's not one of these guys that we hear a ton from. There are a lot of people who are kind of overexposed in the media. They're there all the time. Herschel is by no means overexposed. He's not one of those guys that just is constantly sharing his opinion on every little thing. So it's a little bit of a treat just to get to hear from him in general. And some of the things that you will hear in this discussion. He obviously is very impressed with this crop of Georgia running backs. And there's one thing in particular about this group that he really likes, and he'll explain that coming up in just a moment. He's also not shying away from the notion that Georgia's supposed to win a national championship, that that's the next big goal for this program. He not only thinks that is possible in 2019, he thinks it probably should happen. I don't mind him speaking his mind on that, and he has some quite interesting things to say about what needs to happen the next time Georgia plays Alabama, and Herschel's wish that happens this year. You know, I've kind of gone on record as predicting LSU to win the SEC West. Herschel says he doesn't want anything. Doesn't want any part of that. He wants it to be Alabama, and obviously, when you see Herschel in the kind of condition he's in, I am certainly not going to challenge him and say, well, don't forget about LSU. In the moment with Herschel Walker, you're just going to kind of let him say his piece there because he looks like he could obviously still play the game, and he's got a lot of gravitas, a lot of bass in his voice when he talks about this sport. This was really fun and really special. I wanted to share it with you right now here on DawgNation Daily. One of the cool things I think we've ever gotten to do. A long, several-minute conversation here with Herschel Walker. This was a treat for me. I hope you enjoyed as well here on DawgNation Daily. Right now, DeAndre Swift and all of these guys kind of following your footsteps. What have you seen from them?
You know, it's so funny. DeAndre, I tell you, the running back's absolutely incredible, and that's what I was talking about earlier. I say, you know, what I'm happy to see about the running backs at Georgia is they're not just football players or running backs. They can catch the ball. You know, people didn't realize, you know, when Chubbs left, Chubbs could catch. He wasn't just a guy that can run the ball. He can catch the ball. Michelle, people see it now today. And now DeAndre Swift, let me tell you, that guy's a football player. I wish I had that stop and go like he had when he plays. And he's not just a quick guy, a fast guy, but he's strong. You know, his father is a bodybuilder. I'm like, the guy is strong. And he's a leader. And I think that's what matters a great deal. I think, and that's like the guys that were just here just now, Dale Williams, who was I think he was a junior on that team. I said, we had great leaders on that team. And I think that's what Georgia got right now. And I just put the pressure on them I think Paul Firebone's show. So Coach Smart probably going to get mad at me because I said, Georgia's going to win the East. I said, I think they are right there to win it all. And, you know, they've come close. And now it's time to step over that. You got to get over that. It's time to go out and play now. And I think they can do it.
What did you learn along the way to your national championship that you could provide as wisdom for what Georgia's going to face in 2019?
No, what I learned is you got to win and lose together. But right now you got to just think that you can do it, and you got to believe it. And you got to put people away. You know, I was telling someone earlier, and they said, Herschel, that's very hard for you to say like this. I know, because guys, you got to remember, I've been in MMA. I've been in MMA now for, 8 years. I've been fighting guys that some of the best in the world. When I put a guy down, I'm going to make sure he stays down. And not to be mean, I think that's what Georgia got to do. When they got Alabama down, they got to make sure they stay down. What I mean, you got to now step up and play a little harder. And, you know, it's sorry. They're down 14. I'm sorry. I'm going to get 21 on them because you've seen that team can come back. And that's what you got to do in today's world. And I think with all teams, you know, one of the things I told someone earlier, I said, I was sad to see Fields leave Georgia, but I knew you had to. I was very sad to see him leave because I think that kid got so much talent. But I said, there's no way he could be starting over Fromm. Fromm has proven that he deserved that position, so I think that was hard. And like I said earlier today, I said, I don't believe in transferring, but that's the right thing for him. And for Ohio State fans, that's going to give you a notch. You're now going to step up, and that kid can really, really play. And I think I look at some good things from him.
What's the key to overcoming that hump, like for Georgia, is beating Alabama?
I think the key to overcoming it is to look at you losing those last 2 years. You know, when I lost, guys, I can't sleep. I can't eat. I don't feel good about myself. You know, I don't sleep that much anyway. I don't eat. I eat 1 meal a day. And now not eating at all, not sleeping because I want you again. And I think that's what they got to feel. They got to feel that they want Alabama. You know, I told someone, my nephew played at Clemson. My nephew played at Clemson, and I remember when Clemson was playing Alabama this past year, someone said, oh, Alabama got to beat them. I said, guys, let me tell you what. I can tell you right now, Clemson players hadn't eaten. They don't sleep. This whole year, all they've been doing is thinking about Alabama. And I think that's what Georgia got to do. I know the coaches said let's not do that, but they got to say, I'm running through everyone. And, you know, and not to brag, you're not bragging. You just got to get out and play football right now. They got all the great coaches. They got all the great players. They got everything right now. So you're on the top of the hill, and so go out and do it.
What do you think of this offensive line, Herschel? Do you have a chance to take a look at these guys?
That guy's incredible. The offensive line is great. That is huge. I was in the locker room last year, and I was standing there with two of the offensive linemen, and I was like, wow, these are big old guys. And I'm like, where did they come from? Where did these guys come from? I couldn't believe how big they are today. But I tell you what, and people always ask how I feel like running behind this offensive line today. Now, guys, have you looked at the offensive line I had, even though they were not that big, but I don't think you ever see me get hit in the backfield. You don't see me get hit in the backfield, and I think when you got a running back that can just get to the second level, that's what you want in football. And so it wasn't that I was a great football player. It was great I had a great offensive line, and this is no joke. I think I have taken a lot of the all the awards from my offensive line, but I had some guys that would knock your head off. They were not that big, but they would get after you, and that's what you need. And this offensive line, I think Georgia got now. They're young, they're hungry, they're mad, they're angry, and that's the way you want them to do. But you want them to be consistent, and you want not to make mistakes. You got to continue to keep your head about you when you're doing these things. 2 big games from them, I hear it all the time. And this is honest truth. I want Georgia to win the East. I want Alabama to win the West. I want them to meet up again, because I said you kids cannot, and I'm not jumping that far ahead. You shouldn't do that. But if I was the Georgia player, I'd be glad. That's why I'm running the gauntlet, because I want Alabama, because I think Alabama will end up winning it. You got to go through Alabama to do it.
What did you think about Najee, some of the skills that he possesses?
One of the things I think he possesses, he's extremely strong, and I think that matters a great deal. No, he's resilient. He's very resilient, and I think that's what. I think he's resilient, but I think what he has, Alabama have surrounded a lot of great athletes. And I was telling someone, I happened to get a chance to watch Alabama practice, and they had players on the bench that could be starting for a lot of other teams, and I think that's what makes it very difficult. When you have kids that instead of you having to recruit, they want to go there. It makes recruiting a little bit easier. But then there's no, I don't think you use that as excuses. I tell people, athletes are athletes. Doesn't matter how big, how small you are. When you step on that field, you got to become an athlete. So, and that's the way I've always believed. It doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter where you're from, what color you are. You got to get out there and just play.
You said a while ago that up on the stage that you wish George would name something after you before you died.
Yeah.
I know you'll have kids on that and all that, but seriously,
Yes.
what would you like to see done?
I have no idea. I never think about that. This was so strange is I didn't watch football growing up, and I never really, today I don't keep up with it. I had to keep up with college football. My nephew playing at Clemson, and then I keep up with Georgia. But I don't watch a lot of football. I read about it a lot so I can keep in touch with it, because I get to vote for the Heisman. But, I think this is a great game. This game has done a lot for me in my life. And today what I'm doing with the military is because of football. Today what I'm doing in business because of football. And that's why I made a statement that, sometimes people try to erase history, which I think is a shame, because the SEC, to try to erase history of the SEC, a lot of these guys here that I gotten to know, like Archie and Coach Spurrier, those are guys that laid the path for me, and I want to do the same for other guys. I've gotten the opportunity to be around people like Bo Jackson. I got the opportunity to be around people like some incredible Peyton and Eli, with Archie being the dad, like some great players that a kid from Rice Street, Georgia would never get an opportunity to do that. But I want kids to know this, that I'm no different than they are. Just because now you may see me on TV or doing anything else, I'm that same country boy from Wrightsville, Georgia. But you have to pay the price and sacrifice if you want it. I think that's what some people don't realize. You want something, but you won't sacrifice to get it. People don't know. I never went out to parties. I don't drink. I never even tasted beer. I didn't date. I didn't go and do all those things because I was there to play football. So if you come to play football, you play football, and that's the way I've always believed. And Coach Spurrier and I were laughing in the back because I said, I'm a little different because I love to win. I don't know who in the world don't like to win, and I'm tired of hearing coaches say we're going to have a great season. If you're going to have a great season, why are you playing? You don't have to play. You go ahead and lose all the game. You had a great season, but you say, I want to win. We training to win. Training camp is for us to get prepared to win. Some people ain't going to have the athletes, but you still don't put those athletes down, because when you step on the field, it doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter how big you are. You know, remember, I'm in the cage. You step in that cage, that guy going to hurt you. So you better be ready, or he's going to put you down, and that's the way I look at it.
Probably the greatest win in Georgia history is your victory versus Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. The team's coming to Athens this year. What does it mean to you to see that, either remembering your own history or kind of a unique chapter in this modern time?
Well, the history of me playing Notre Dame is an honor, because that's all I heard about was Notre Dame, and we got an opportunity to play them. They had all those pro scouts and pro players that was going to be going, and they were a very well coached team. And for them now to come to Athens, and for Athens to get an opportunity to play them, the Dogs get an opportunity to play them in Athens, Georgia, that's almost unheard of. Whenever you talk football, you think of Notre Dame, you think of USC, like they were talking about rivalry, you think of things like that, and now Alabama, and now for Notre Dame to come in, that's going to be exciting. I think it's a night game. I think there's going to be a night game, and I tell you, that's going to be rocking in Athens. I'm going to be well. I'm supposed to be there. And God's will, I'm going to be there, and I want to see what the Dogs can do. It's going to be a test. And Notre Dame got a good team. Notre Dame got a very, very good team. But that's what I was talking about right now when I said you got to want Alabama. You got to want Alabama enough that you're going to go out and beat Notre Dame. You got to want Alabama enough that you got to go out and beat whoever's in front of you right now. Otherwise, you're not going to get them. I'm tired of people saying that, we should have did this, we should have done. No, you should do it. Quit talking about what you should have done. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, then get anything done.
So really good stuff there from Herschel Walker, the great Georgia former running back. Good to have you this year on DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. My name is Brandon Adams. Of course, we're live on video today at 10 a.m. Like always, the DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, the Twitter page as well, and the radio at noon, of course, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Good to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily. That's not it for us when it comes to interviews. We'll hear from another College Football Hall of Famer, Matt Stinchcomb, coming up a little bit later on. Before that we get ready to do that, though, let me tell you about a couple things here as a part of our program today. First of all, DawgNation Days of Summer is coming up on Thursday, August 1st. We're going to be there at Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa. Now, there are still an opportunity for you to book a room. We hope you go to DawgNation.com to find out more information about that. If you're in the North Georgia area, you can get close to Towns County that night. We'd love to have you come on by and see us there as we kick off the event that night at 6 p.m. So it's going to be a lot of fun. 6 to 8 is kind of the time for the DawgNation Days of Summer event. We'll also broadcast some of that live on our video channels for those of you that can't be there with us. I'll do DawgNation Daily again the following morning at 10 a.m. from Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa. We have a golf outing going on later that afternoon. My understanding is we may have like 1 or 2 spots left. We are down to the wire in terms of an opportunity to play golf. You can go to dawgnationhelp@gmail.com. That's the email address, dawgnationhelp@gmail.com. If you want to find out more information about that, we might still be able to squeeze you in terms of our golf outing, but we are running out of space on that. They also have a really big golf tournament that weekend at Brasstown, so space is kind of limited when it comes to the golf, but we're going to have a great time. It's a beautiful course. Going to be so much fun. And if you want to come by and see us do DawgNation Daily there that morning, you can do that. But the most important thing to tell you about when it comes to Brasstown Valley Resort and Spa is the fact that they are sponsoring our DawgNation Days of Summer VIP Stay giveaway. So if you go to DawgNation.com, you can find the tab there and kind of click into that. Register for your chance to win. You can be a part of our VIP reception at 5 p.m. You get the special VIP gift. So you've got a lot of opportunities coming up to win on that, or a big opportunity, I should say, to win on that. But you got to get in and register for your chance to win right now. Go to DawgNation.com and find out more details about that. Now, with all that said, let me go around the doghouse here. It's presented today by our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And I want to talk about a couple things here before we hear from Matt Stinchcomb. One of those things is a reflection back on a lot of what Herschel Walker had to say, and also a look quickly at some of the other stuff that the Georgia folks had to say. We're going to kind of do all that here as a part of DawgNation Daily here for a moment. Let me start with the Herschel thing here. There was a moment you may have heard in that interview where it was asked to Herschel about, hey, something named after you in Athens. Would you like to see that? The reason when that question gets asked is going back to something that Herschel Walker had talked about during a larger press conference that he was a part of, along with former Ole Miss quarterback Archie Manning and longtime Georgia nemesis Steve Spurrier. They were there in honor of the 150 years of college football, the SEC's role and all of that. I guess the SEC Network's got a series of documentaries coming out celebrating some of this kind of stuff. So Archie, Herschel, and Spurrier were there to kind of speak on some of that kind of stuff. And I asked Herschel during the press conference. You didn't hear this during the interview. This was a different media gathering. I asked him about how it felt to him to see the field at Sanford Stadium named after Vince Dooley. After all, Herschel's a huge contributor to the Dooley legacy. What does it mean for him personally to see Dooley's name on the field? And in talking about that, Herschel also mentions the idea of, hey, if you're going to name something after somebody, do it while they're still alive. He said, if you're going to name something after me, please do it while you're alive. And obviously, Herschel's just kind of saying that in passing because given a chance to expand upon his thoughts there, he kind of chose not to. But it does bring up for a lot of people the question of, is Georgia doing enough to honor Herschel Walker? Now that it is taking the right step with Coach Dooley and putting his name on the field at Sanford Stadium, the next obvious step there would, to me, seem to be, the statue for a Herschel. And there's a lot of prominent places where something like that could be put. And if it's one of those things where you want a new statue built or something along those lines, whatever it is, whatever it takes to satisfy all the parties involved here, it does to me seem like a no-brainer that something like that hasn't already been done. Maybe a statue commissioned by Georgia here in a prominent place, the kind of thing where fans can go take their pictures with it before the game. And you may say, well, if you get on the road of Herschel Walker, you may also need one for the other Heisman Trophy winner in Georgia history, Frank Sinkwich, Charlie Trippey, who's kind of also in that kind of category of true all-time greats. Maybe you give one to him as well, and I'm fine with that. I've kind of joked before that I think there's, certainly no, shortage of statues. I enjoy those kinds of things. I think they do a good job of marking the history of any sports entity, Georgia included. And I think right now it is a little bit of a hole in the, legacy of Georgia football, the fact that Walker is not remembered more around the stadium. So Herschel's not going to campaign for that because he's too much of a gentleman. But I think a lot of Georgia fans and, frankly, media around the program on his behalf are kind of asking these questions right now. I think that's appropriate. When is Georgia going to do what it can to honor Herschel Walker? And I'd like to see more of that done. Now that Dooley's getting what he deserves, I think the next step in that is to see Herschel Walker get what he deserves as well. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And for those of you that are homeowners, and so many of you are, one of the scariest things you can look and see in your house is that cracked foundation, that damp spot in your basement, any kind of water seeping through into your basement can be a scary thing. And when you have a problem like that, you want a solution. Well, the good news is Engineered Solutions of Georgia is a solutions-based company. That means if it's a simple solution, they'll provide one for you. If it's a matter of running over to the hardware store and getting a blah, 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 they're just going to tell you to do that. But if it's something more serious than that, well, you want an expert's help on your side, and Engineered Solutions of Georgia certainly provides that too. Full-time engineers on staff. That's the kind of thing that separates ESOG from its competitors in the market. It's the reason why you're going to want to give them a call. Dial 678-ESOG now. 678-ESOG now is the number to dial. I heard from MCUGA on Twitter, nice enough to send me a message to say that he had Engineered Solutions of Georgia come out to his house and take a look. He was very satisfied with the work that was done. I was really happy to be able to see that from him. I'm always grateful when those of you who support DawgNation Daily also support the folks that support us. It was great to see, and it was great to hear MCUG on Twitter sharing some good news about his experience with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. So have them come out, and I'm believing, going to be just as satisfied as MC was. So check him out online or I should say give him a call by dialing 678-ESOG now. 678-ESOG now. All right. It was a busy day for us yesterday at SEC Media Days. Obviously, the big thing is getting a chance to talk to Kirby Smart, the Georgia coach. Jake Fromm was there. You probably saw that on DawgNation Daily yesterday. J.R. Reed, Andrew Thomas, and that's really the reason why we were there. But it's also sometimes an opportunity to talk about some of those and talk to some of those other media types, right? Those guys that share opinions about college football, that watch Georgia closely, and certainly in that category is the great former Georgia offensive lineman Matt Stinchcomb. He's a college football Hall of Famer. He's a terrific analyst. I think he's one of the best guys on TV working with the SEC Network. He's a part of their broadcast teams again. That was announced this week by the SEC Network, and he's got a keen eye for what's going on at Georgia as well. We've obviously been doing some stuff lately with his brother John Stinchcomb, and John, as for as terrific an analyst as he is, Matt's right there with him in terms of having a great perspective on Georgia, the SEC, and the rest of college football. So it was a thrill for me to be able to talk to Matt yesterday, and I wanted to present that as a part of DawgNation Daily for you as well right now. I'm here with former Georgia offensive lineman and SEC Network broadcast, Matt Stinchcomb. We've been doing some stuff with your brother lately, John Stinchcomb, so we may call you the other Stinchcomb just for a little bit if you don't mind.
Fair enough. That seems reasonable.
It's obviously an exciting time for Georgia fans with your position group in particular. You've obviously not just watched this Georgia team closely, but you've evaluated the other offensive lines around the SEC. What do you see from this group beyond the fact that it's highly regarded and very big? In particular, when you look at the Georgia offensive line, what do you see?
Well, you took my favorite adjectives away already. It should be the best offensive front, maybe in the country. Oregon's got a good front. A lot of people are talking about them. Hard to evaluate, I think, in that conference. A little bit easier maybe here because of the defensive fronts that they'll see. It'll be a fun test. Oregon's going to face one of the best defensive lines in Auburn, week 1. And, of course, Georgia will see them in the latter part of the season. So if it does come down to those two units and who's better, there's a very real chance that there will have a common opponent by which you can evaluate them.
A lot of talk here this week about Georgia, and there's a balance. On the one hand, you see Georgia make the playoff in 2017, win the SEC. Kirby Smart's had a great run of success, especially in recruiting. On the other hand, there are a lot of questions from media members about when's the next step, when's the national championship. If you're Georgia, how do you process all that? They say they want to do more, but from a tangible, specific aspect on the field, how do you take that next step as a program?
Well, the only way you can do it is to win a national championship, right? He's able to win an SEC championship, contend for another. That's the drought. That's the box that has gone unchecked for, close to half a century now? So I don't think anyone in and around that program is real excited about the idea that persists. And when you look at the level of accomplishment that Georgia's been able to achieve in a short period of time under Kirby Smart, obviously the next step involves a national title. That said, if and when you don't get it, that doesn't mean that there's necessarily a regression, especially in the age that we find ourselves in. Look, you've got the southeastern part of the United States where most of the elite level of football is being played. You look at a Clemson and Alabama, a Georgia, and LSU, maybe again this year, Texas A&M in the very near future. And so because of that, it's not always easy to emerge even from your region, much less the entire country, as the best team.
SEC Network had a big announcement this week. You got a broadcast team going back at this for another year. How excited are you about another year in this league? And you kind of talked about some of the top contenders. Should be another fun year around this conference once again.
If only this was a good conference to cover from a football perspective, right? I mean, how would you not be excited to cover these teams and the fact that they're almost always in the title hunt? There's almost always a rivalry game. It's contentious, to say the least, from intra-conference division rivals. It's just a lot of fun. There's plenty of storylines. There's guys that project to the NFL. So because of that, there's always something fun to talk. This is arguably the best sport to cover for this conference.
Before we let you go, one of the highlights of my summer last year in the lead up to the start of the season was getting a chance to be with you and your brother John, who we joked about before, former Georgia quarterback David Green. Dogs for Kids, so much fun. There's a new venue this year, but still for a great cause. What a great time this has been, and what an outstanding event this expects to be one more time here in 2019.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate your support, too, in the past. We're going to do it on August 10th this year. A lot of the same guys, a lot of former guys, a lot of new guys that used to play at Georgia. We're going to do it at the Stave Room right next to ASW, American Spirit Works. A great spot. It was a really cool spot. We're excited about that. We've had some great venues in the past, so we're shaking it up a little bit this year. It should be a lot of fun.
Well, it's great to talk to you about some college football. We'll look forward to seeing you on TV and around the South from here and there, and thanks for your time. Why am I yelling so much? That's my first time hearing that. And for those of you that just heard it as well, I'm sure you're asking the same question. It's one of those things, sometimes when I'm in kind of a noisy environment, maybe I feel the need to raise my voice level above that, although most of you would tell me that my voice level doesn't need to be raised much higher than it already is. I'm already loud enough in most environments, including a noisy. environment. But the truth is that room where we spoke to Matt Stinchcomb yesterday wasn't necessarily all that loud. So me screaming in Matt Stinchcomb's face was probably not necessary. So let me be the first to apologize to Matt for that, because there was no need in me talking to him as loudly as I was. I also referenced with him off the top there, and it's fun to have the great College Football Hall of Famer and terrific analyst Matt Stinchcomb on the program. I referenced with him some of the stuff that we had been doing with John. You've heard John on DawgNation Daily recently. You saw him back at a Cali Resort and Gardens back in June. I just filmed a series of videos with John Stinchcomb. They're going to be part of our preseason coverage here at DawgNation. I think you're going to really like those, and we may have a surprise or two yet to come when it comes to a John Stinchcomb for the upcoming season. So stay tuned for a whole lot more on that. But after spending a lot of time with John lately, it was fun to be able to talk to his brother Matt there, and really interesting to hear him once again kind of put Georgia in that conversation of, okay, it's time now to see if Georgia can take that next step as a program. And it's undeniable, having been at SEC Media Days yesterday, that is the real, there's kind of like sort of a one-sentence issue facing every SEC team, or, one prominent question that's going to be asked over and over and over. It's Alabama's turn at SEC Media Days today. Frankly, I'm sort of glad I'm not there for that. They're going to be asked about Clemson 9 million times, the same way Alabama's asked over and over about Clemson. Georgia's kind of asked over and over about Alabama. That's kind of the pecking order in the sport right now. Clemson's at the top of the heap. Alabama's just below them. By perception, Georgia's just below Alabama based on the results of the last two head-to-head meetings. And, Stinchcomb, like all of us, yourself included, me as well, we all kind of have that question of, well, when is that going to change? I think the one really good thing, and I'll probably spend a lot of time over the course of the next couple of weeks talking about this. And I think I even maybe mentioned this on DawgNation Daily yesterday. I think the one really good thing about those kinds of answers, or those kinds of questions, is the way that Georgia doesn't shy away from answering them. You allow, that kind of question to be posed to Kirby Smart or Jake Fromm or J.R. Reed or Andrew Thomas, any of the players who were there. They may not mention Alabama by name, but the idea of winning a national championship, of finishing 2019 better than 2018, that's not a topic they're scared of discussing at all. The expectations that we have for Georgia, the Georgia players and coaches have the same expectations, if not a even higher demand for themselves, what they expect to see this year. And if you're a UGA fan, I think you certainly like that, and we've got plenty more DawgNation Daily coming up.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So really fun there to be able to talk to Matt Stinchcomb. I think Matt's I think he's a great television broadcaster. I think it's really cool now in this era where we see so many former Georgia guys doing so many things so well, whether it be in professional business-related walks of life or broadcasting stuff. A lot of former Dogs are now coaches spread out across the country. Over the course of the last 25 years or so, that generation of football players kind of predating the current Kirby Smart era, a lot of those guys have made pretty good names for themselves in a lot of different walks of life, and Matt's certainly one of those. And he was good enough to spend a little bit of time with us there on DawgNation Daily yesterday, and I certainly appreciated that. Before we roll on their SEC through, let me tell you about my friends at Kroger. And now through July 23rd, you can earn 2 extra fuel points for every $1 you spend on Simple Truth and Private Selection items. That's with digital coupons. So get those Simple Truth items, those Private Selection items, and you can get 2 extra fuel points for every $1 you spend there at your local Kroger. So check that out between now and July 23rd. All right, so Georgia is not the only SEC team, obviously, going through SEC Media Days. We weren't even the only team there yesterday. We've already seen a good bit roll through. Let me see if I can kind of recap us where we are through these first 2 days, and then we'll kind of set the stage for what's going to happen there today. Let me start with yesterday. While Georgia was there, Ole Miss was also there. Not a lot really coming out of the Ole Miss session whatsoever. I don't think Ole Miss is going to be very good. I don't think Ole Miss thinks it's going to be very good, and so they were kind of an afterthought yesterday. There was some interesting stuff coming out of both Tennessee and Texas A&M. There's kind of a weird moment with Jeremy Pruitt where in the big room with the other reporters, Pruitt essentially tried to execute a filibuster, meaning he talked and talked and talked and talked, and basically trying to run out the clock so he couldn't face too many questions. And for the life of me, I don't really know why Pruitt was as worried about taking questions yesterday as he was. The fact is, the real pressure on Pruitt, the real tough questions for him, I think probably come next year in July in SEC Media Days, more so than this going into his second season as Tennessee coach. I just don't think the Vols are still, all that consequential, certainly not consequential enough to ask some real tough questions to. And frankly, he's got some things about his offseason that he might be able to brag about. They had some recruiting wins. They bring in at least 2 really good offensive linemen. I think getting Jim Chaney as an offensive coordinator is a competent upgrade for them. Going out and doing what they did to bring in Derek Ansley with the defense. Now, maybe he doesn't quite want to talk about the shuffling of the coaching responsibilities that were required to bring in Derek Ansley. Maybe that was the kind of thing he wanted to avoid yesterday. Maybe that's why he filibusters as long as he did. That's certainly fair to be said. I, at one point in time, heard some reporters kind of pushing him on what looked to be him going after some players on the Missouri roster. Kirby Smart had said he was going to be hands-off and not recruit players on that roster after Missouri was put on NCAA sanctions going back to an academic issue in which Missouri was cooperative with the SEC on. Pruitt was accused of going after those players. You may say, well, it's not even wrong to do that necessarily, but it certainly created a little bit of a hubbub within the SEC on that. He was questioned on that, kind of tried to dodge that. So Pruitt was a little nervous, anxious sounding yesterday, despite the fact that of all the teams in the SEC, all the coaches in the SEC, I don't view him as within the crosshairs all that much in terms of the overall pressure cooker right now. If it's not much better on the field for Pruitt this season, he may deal with that next year. But for the yesterday, I thought he was, for the most part, a relatively inconsequential coach. Jimbo Fisher had his moment, and obviously there's a little bit of a tie between Georgia and Texas A&M right now, and it's not just because these two teams play in November, although I do think that's one of the more interesting interdivisional games. Is that the way you say it? Cross-divisional opponents this year. I think that A&M and Georgia in Athens is a pretty interesting one because A&M's not been there since Texas A&M's been in the SEC. But the other thing about Texas A&M and its tie to Georgia is the fact that Jimbo, much like Kirby Smart, is trying to become that first former Saban assistant to get that win versus him head-to-head, as you're probably well aware of, and certainly Kirby Smart's tired of answering these questions. No former Saban assistant has won a head-to-head matchup as a head coach with Saban. I think it's probably fair to say that Kirby Smart is the more likely of the two, or really the more likely of any of the former Saban assistants currently coaching, of being able to get that done. But Jimbo does get his turn guaranteed in the regular season to get that chance, and he's trying to build a program at Texas A&M, and I think for the most part he's put together a pretty talented roster. So A&M and Georgia, Jimbo and Kirby will be linked by more than just the fact that they play later on in November. They are also kind of on the same mission, and frankly, much the same way that Georgia has built for itself a recruiting power in the east, to the east of Alabama, to a slightly lesser extent, I think that Jimbo has also done a pretty good job of building a recruiting threat to the west of Alabama, and that's probably going to be a story worth watching coming up in the time to come. Today is a day that will be dominated by Alabama. Nick Saban, as I was doing this show live, I was seeing him on TV on the SEC network. He's meeting in that sort of big room, facing a lot of questions from reporters, and as I said before, it'll be a ton of Alabama-themed questions for Georgia yesterday. We saw that play out, and it'll be almost as many Clemson-themed questions for Alabama. I'll be curious to see if there's any other big topic that emerges. The health or lack thereof of Tua Tagovailoa may come up. Alabama's need to finish the season better after it probably didn't play as well against its better opponents last year as it did earlier in the season against its lesser known opponents. That may come up some. It seems fair to ask what the long-term future of Alabama, especially after another year in which we completely cycled through, or saw Alabama cycle through its assistants. This is one of those things where I've been of the belief that Alabama is on a short-term trajectory right now. If this was professional sports, there would be no doubt to me that Alabama would be looking to trade its prospects for veteran players to make a stretch run towards another big championship. I just think that Nick Saban's operating within a short-term time frame right now, a short-term tenure right now, and I think that's a fair question to ask him, although he's done a pretty good job of deflecting all of that, and he certainly had plenty of willing accomplices in the media to help him do that. But that's going to be kind of what goes on there today at SEC Media Days, and obviously there's anything of note for Georgia fans that comes out of that. We'll be there to cover that for you here on DawgNation Daily or DawgNation.com as well. Let me, though, in the time we have left, talk about something else just for a moment. Will Scott is a listener to DawgNation Daily, and he reached out to me on Twitter to let me know of some sad news. Jeff Sanders, a Georgia fan that many of you have probably known and maybe seen on social media, maybe seen in Athens, wherever else. Well, Jeff has passed away, and if you're watching on video, we're sharing some photos of this, and I wanted to share this, first of all, as a way of honoring Jeff and, what he meant to so many people, the people that knew him. But it's also probably fair to say, as you're looking at these pictures could be virtually any one of us, right? Sitting in Sanford Stadium, hanging around the canopy tent at a tailgate with what looks to be several generations of UGA fans, a big old spread of food. This is the kind of thing that we all do, right? And obviously on this show, we spend all this time talking about what Georgia's going to do and will we get to see Georgia win a national championship, and how much longer will we have to wait for that to happen? And that's the topic at hand when a show like DawgNation Daily takes place, and I would never shy away from that responsibility to facilitate and narrate that conversation for each of you. But also the thing that goes unsaid during a show like this, the unspoken words is that the championships and the wins and the recruiting victories and the collection of 5 stars, that's really only part of the story. That when it's all said and done, it's the connections we make with each other. I've been lucky enough to meet many of you. Some of you I only congregate with through social media, but that still feels like something. It's that bond we form together following this team that matters more than anything else. And on a day or a week like this, where we honor the passing of Jeff Sanders, we're left to kind of think about that those connections, those memories are the things that matter more than anything else. And it's obviously a really sad time when somebody who we've shared that with leaves us, and in this case for the friends and family of Jeff, that's certainly the case. But it's also a time for all of us to stop and appreciate the memories that we've collected. Look forward to the ones we've still got yet to come, and think about all the people that have gone with us along the way there. So to Will and everybody else who knew Jeff, my thoughts and prayers go out to all of you. I know this is a hard week as you think about his passing, but I hope that you'll join all of us in celebrating the memories that so many of us have collected along the way. And thank you so much for sharing those photos. For the folks watching on video, they got a chance to see them. I think it's a reminder of what Georgia football is all about, that the friends that we have made and those memories that we've collected there with them. And I certainly hope the memories of Jeff keep all of you comforted as you go through this tough time. And no doubt Jeff loved that Georgia fight song, so we'll play that in honor of him on the way out the door here today. And we'll remind you, as well, good Gator haters do, and we around here we do the Gator Hater Updater. It's now been 991 days since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. That's good news. It's our Gator Hater Updater right here on DawgNation Daily. Let me also tell you word about my friends at Online Trading Academy. We talk about them around the doghouse each and every week, and I'm a big believer that they provide a service that's important for you. They help you make money in the markets. And listen, you got to have that, right? You want more money in your pocket. Well, learning how the markets work is a great way to do that. So make the decision to invest in yourself by checking out tradingacademy.com/Atlanta. The website, once again, tradingacademy.com/Atlanta. Learn a variety of trading styles across a spectrum of asset classes. It is usable information. It's found there for you at tradingacademy.com/Atlanta. Hope you enjoyed Herschel and Stinchcomb today. We'll see you back tomorrow for DawgNation Daily. And on video, after what has been kind of a busy little run for us here over the last couple of days or so, we will get ready to roll on with our R.S. Andrews cool down. We'll kind of take a break and relax here for a moment and talk about what you want to talk about. There are a few takeaways from me from Georgia SEC Media Days that I haven't quite gotten a chance to get to yet. I hope to be able to share those with you over the course of the next couple of days. So let us see if we can kind of chat about this right now and your takeaways from what you heard from Herschel, what you may have heard from Stinchcomb, and just have a good time. And as we do so, I'll remind you about R.S. Andrews, that, it is, I think, going to be 90-something degrees on the temperature today. No telling what the heat index is then going to say. That is hot, and you don't need me to tell you that. You also don't need me to tell you that you want your air conditioning working on a day like this. Now, my wife told me this morning that she wanted to turn our air conditioning up a little bit. She thought it was getting a little too cold in the house, and the kids were feeling the same way. And so maybe not everybody likes their house quite as cold as I do, but my guessing is that many of you like it just as cold as I do. You want the AC to be working, and if you're just not working as well as you think it might be, then you want to get that Smiley tune-up from my friends at RS Andrews. Their tech's going to show up and get your system back to factory fresh specs. And it's just $99. So go to rsandrews.com. You can find out more information about that as they bring the RS Andrews school down to us each and every day here on DawgNation Daily. All right, let us do some Facebook comments first. We'll go to the YouTube. Actually, I did a lot of YouTube. I did a lot of Facebook comments first yesterday. Let me pop over to YouTube first, and we'll do Facebook after that, and we'll get to Twitter eventually. Lloyd Dog says 102 degrees in Blackshear, Georgia yesterday. That's hot. Lloyd, thanks for sharing. George, who's a resident Florida fan, says, I feel really bad for you guys about the heat wave. My brother is down here in Mississippi, and he said he's just getting cooked like an egg. Yeah, George, it's been hot lately. It really has been. Really has been. Crow King 123 checking in. Great to see. Mike D shining out Pine Sol Lemon Scent. Good to have Pine back in the comment section. For sure. Pine Sol Lemon Scent says, great questions yesterday, BA. Well, that's good to know. Maybe I didn't shout all of them quite as loudly as I shouted in poor Matt Stinchcomb's face, but that's good to know. I'm glad. Thanks for saying that. And, listen, I'll be very honest with you. When I go into an environment like this, I really feel like I have one goal in mind. I try to think about many of you, and I have to sort of think of a composite listener, right? I take the sort of combined thoughts of our Facebook and our YouTube comment sections, the folks who reach out to me on Twitter at DawgNation Daily, and I try to catalog all the things that you all have been asking me, and I try to, as much as I possibly can, ask those questions of Kirby and ask those questions of the players who are involved. And, that's really what I feel like is my responsibility, and I feel like it's an awesome responsibility to be able to ask on your behalf the things that you want to know. And sometimes we don't always get the answers that we want, and, other people have their own agendas, and so sometimes you don't get to ask all the questions you want to ask. But when called upon, when I get the microphone in my hand, I'm going to try to do your bidding. I'm going to try to ask what you want, and if I'm not asking what you want, then I'm failing. And I take that very, very seriously. I take it very seriously. Brian Kephart says, BA, what do you think of a transfer change? An undergrad has to stay 2 years before they can transfer to create less knee-jerk decisions. I think that's a fair question to bring up. I think that the market, to a lot of extent, is going to take care of this for the coaches and the NCAA itself. I mean, Kirby Smart, I think, addressed this a bit yesterday, that a lot of people who go in the transfer portal may find that they don't have a scholarship waiting for them on the other end of the portal. Because we think about Justin Fields, 5-star quarterback, not playing at Georgia, wants to go to a big power school like Ohio State where you can play. And that's kind of the dramatic, sexy story within the transfer portal realm. But most of this is guy buried at the end of the depth chart, coaches yelling at him during practice. He's tired of that. Let me go see if there's somewhere easier than this to go play. And that guy is likely not going to find a home, at least at the FBS level. He may go from FBS school to FCS school or, something along those lines. So I think to a certain extent, the portal is a little bit of, 5% of the guys in the portal get 95% of the attention, which is the way a lot of things in life kind of work out. Your idea about staying 2 years, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. I wouldn't mind more transparency from the NCAA in terms of why it grants eligibility to this guy and why it grants, chooses not to grant that to somebody else. Because let me make an overly philosophical point for like 2 seconds. And this is going to seem like a heavy-handed analogy, but I can't think of another way to say it. How like the Constitution bars cruel and unusual punishment? I think we all have an idea of what cruel punishment is, but sometimes unusual punishment can be kind of hard to figure out. I think when the rules change from year to year to year, I think that veers in the direction of the NCAA also having a version of unusual punishment. Demetrius Robertson gets free pass to go from Cal to Georgia. Tate Martell gets a free pass to go from Ohio State to Miami. Justin Fields gets his free pass, but then Luke Ford is dealt with very stringently. Maybe the freedom of this year looks different next year. Maybe it's a lot more stringent going into 2020 because the coaches feel like the tide has stemmed too much in the direction of player movement and player freedom. Well, if the rules are changing from year to year or changing within a year from player to player, that starts to feel like an unusual punishment for those who are not getting treated the same way or as treated as leniently as some are. And that's the issue the NCAA's got to really address. My fear is it doesn't want to do that, though, because the more transparent you become, the less absolute your power is. And the NCAA is always going to ultimately be a power grab. What else is on YouTube here for a moment? Brian also mentioning Devin Gale's new house, the retrofitted house for wheelchair accessibility and things like that. I think that's a great thing to see. Those of you who work in real estate or work in construction know how much of a need accessible housing is, both in terms of our rapidly aging population and for folks like Devin who are younger but still facing some of the same kind of needs. There aren't enough houses out there that can provide what Devin needs, and it can be expensive to get a house built that way. There's a lot of considerations that go into that, and it's really cool to see him getting that taken care of. That was a great thing to be able to see. Jordan says, read this, so I did. By the way, I think that Jordan is the GOAT, if for those of you who want to catalog that. Ross Chadwick says, what do you think of Media Days moving to Atlanta next year? For the most part, I don't really have a strong feeling or another about it being in Hoover or being in Atlanta. I think it is a different event when it's in Atlanta. It's, first of all, probably more work for me because I'll have to be there all 4 days as opposed to yesterday. I could make the excuse to only be there for the day that George is going to be there. Somehow I think I'll probably end up being at all 4 days with it back in Atlanta again. I think a lot of the media itself actually likes the event better in Hoover than it does in Atlanta. You don't care what reporters think, so I don't really talk about that kind of stuff too much. But I think there's a quaintness to the event in Hoover that does not exist when it comes to the event being in Atlanta. Atlanta's a really big city. It kind of swallows events whole. I think to a certain extent it swallowed SEC Media Days whole a year ago. I think going to Nashville the following year could be really fun. I mentioned this off the top of the show. Somebody asked me, is Media Days fun or not? I think it can be fun in Hoover because I do love the SEC. In addition to obviously having affection for UGA, many of you know, you've seen me talking SEC for years. I just like the SEC in general. I like debating with some of you about how good Tennessee is going to be, regardless of what happens against Georgia. I like the SEC conversation, in general. Who's up, who's down, who's in the hot seat. It's a reason why we carve out a small portion of our show to do that each day, because I think that's a fun conversation. There is something to be said for being in the epicenter of that talk, and in and around Hoover, Alabama for a few days. That's all anybody talks about. And I do appreciate the fact that the state of Alabama is so college football obsessed, SEC obsessed in particular. I do appreciate that. And I think to the extent that SEC Media Days means anything, it does mean something different when it's not in Hoover, Alabama. I will say that. Some of you also, and I'm going to go to Facebook here pretty soon, but some of you are also talking about what needs to be done for Herschel. Pro King mentions maybe attaching his name along with Billy Payne to the indoor facility. Light Dog mentioned the indoor facility there as well. Dan Riggins on the subject of SEC talk says, any chance of doing another SEC type show? Dan, we're always open to stuff like that. The issue sometimes, though, is carving out that time. So that's always the kind of thing I'm, hoping to be able to do. I'd like to be able to do more content than I'm currently doing on a number of fronts, but it comes down to how many hours are there in a day and how much time can you carve out with as much stuff devoted to DawgNation as we have right now. But I'm glad that you're still interested in that and glad to hear you still asking about that. And, we just have to sort of see. Dennis Wilson, the resident ACC fan, says the SEC talk bores him. Well, Dennis, you can only imagine how a lot of Georgia fans feel about ACC talk. Devin Glenn says that he thinks y'all, and I'm assuming he means me, sleeps on his boy Quay Walker. So, Devin, here's what I'll say. And I didn't play this audio today, although I'll probably play tomorrow. So I asked J.R. Reed yesterday, and you probably haven't seen this yet because I don't think we've put this video up. I said, so JR, you got a deep roster, but after G-Day, it looked like that Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean were likely going to be a big part of this defense. You probably throw Jermaine Johnson in that as well. What are your expectations for these freshmen? And you ask kind of an open-ended question like that, just kind of see where he takes it. And I thought that JR took it in a very interesting direction. He said, yeah, they're really good. And yet I wouldn't, I'm paraphrasing now, And yet I wouldn't sleep on the previous year's class because they're really good too. And he mentioned Quay Walker by name. And that to me got my attention because, let's face it, one of the reasons why we don't talk more about Quay Walker on this show right now is because Quay doesn't come up much at Georgia. I don't think Kirby Smart mentioned him by name at all during spring practice. And the linebacking core is just really deep right now. Think about all the names we've discussed. You've also got guys coming back from injury, incoming freshmen like Ryan Davis and Tresman Marshall that factor into this discussion somehow, some way. So if you think that we're sleeping on Quay Walker, then you may have good company in that, because yesterday, when asked about the chances of the 2019 signees really breaking out and busting out in a big way this year, J.R. Reed said, don't forget about those 2018 guys, and Quay Walker was mentioned by name. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So Devin says he did see it. Okay, so maybe we did put that up somewhere, or maybe somebody put it up somewhere. So I'm at least glad that you saw it, and we'll try to. Part of the challenge is, and I think Connor and I both feel this way. So when you're done and you've recorded all this stuff, sometimes it's sort of hard to know what you even have, and sort of a plan for disseminating it all. So my guess is you'll be seeing some brand new stuff here on DawgNation Daily for like the next couple of weeks, probably. Because we got a lot of stuff, but I'm glad that you did see that, though. Good to hear, Devin. Dave, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Somebody also said Crow King says the linebacking class for Georgia is just stupid talented. And I talked about that with Nate McBride back during the spring. Because, Nate, who obviously comes up a lot in our comment section, he was like a number 6 linebacker in the country or something when he signed at Georgia. I forget the exact rating, but this was a very highly rated recruit, and based on the Georgia level of recruiting prior to that, was a gigantic recruit for Georgia to have signed. And yet, since Nate signed at Georgia, I think you can make a case, and maybe somebody would point me out to be factually inaccurate on this. And if you did, I'd take your word for it. But how many programs in the history of the modern age of recruiting have recruited linebackers better than Georgia has the last couple of years? So, when you mention a Walker, you have to mention a Channing Tindall. And then you get into the 2019 guys. I just mentioned Brian Davis and Tresman Marshall, 2 guys we don't talk about at all, partially because they're out of sight, out of mind, having been injured, back during spring practice, or at least recovering from injuries. Nakobe Dean, you can't keep him off the field. He just may be too smart and too fast. You may not be able to keep him off the field. And then you got the veteran presence. I got like Monty Rice, because I believe that Monty is really good at stopping the run. Georgia needs that. Could have used him mightily against Alabama. It's a deep crop of linebackers. I think that's absolutely an accurate statement to make. Connor Riley joins us. By the way, when Connor joined us on DawgNation Daily yesterday from Hoover outside, it was Connor Riley in daylight. Many of you don't get to see that. The truth is, it's actually daylight where Connor is right now. We just have some shades pulled, so it always makes it look like Connor's in the dark. But the room he's in, you can see out the window, nice view of the Dunwoody skyline here, so you can see all of that. But it just looks like he's in the dark.
I like it dark.
Yeah, Connor's a vampire. Connor, before I hear from you, since I haven't read any Facebook comments, can I read a couple Facebook comments before we kind of move on with anything else?
Yep.
Cody Whitfield says, Georgia has the talent to win the big game. And if not this year, Fromm and a lot of seniors will return to try to win it in 2020. Well, Cody, one way or another, whether Georgia wins it or not, whether Fromm and those, as you say, seniors do return for 2020, I still think Georgia's a national championship contender in 2020. I don't care what the roster looks like. This is not the kind of thing for me that's a one-year story. And I hope you saw our D&90. It's up on the video channels now. I'm going to put this on the site later on. Paul Feinbaum said that. I interviewed Paul, and he said, something to the effect of this idea that Georgia has to win it this year. Now, Georgia fans want to win it this year. They're restless about getting it done. But this is not a Georgia has to win right now situation. I think that's a pretty good point. Lee Bridges says, the talking season has worn me out. I'm so ready for the season to start to make it to Atlanta and be Bama, go Dogs. Lee, it's funny that you say that because, and maybe this is just me being wired differently as a media person, the talking season, especially when it intensifies, that actually gets me more excited for the year. And I've never made any apologies. I like the hot takes. I like it all. I like for it to start as early as January. I really do. It's just my favorite thing in the world because, really, Unfortunately, the talking season is this long. The season is this long. So if you don't like the talking season, sometimes, you don't like, what is unfortunately the majority of college football. I get your point about being anxious for the season to begin, but hearing from the people we've heard from this week, kind of getting a little bit more serious with their predictions, you can kind of hear just in their voices they've done a little bit more research behind some of the things they say. Connor, that actually gets me more excited for the start of the upcoming season.
I don't know if I'm more excited for the season than to start. I'm just more ready for talking season to end.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think it's all a part of the build-up. Taveda, J.C. Taylor says, if you're not talking about us in the national championship this year, I don't want you to talk at all. And yet, Taveda, I think a lot of Georgia fans are very much in agreement on that this is the year for Georgia. Matt Rugavina says he lives out here in Houston, Texas, where the SEC meets Big 12 country. One thing I'll give the Big 12 people at their media days, those cowboy hats. Yeah, not a lot of props from the SEC media. I think that's probably true. Brett Barfield says, BA, in your opinion, let me get the rest of Brett's comment. He says, BA, in your opinion, does the success of this season rest on the young guys? No, I don't necessarily think so. I think this is still a team that's mostly going to be led by its veterans. And, I've said before, where there's an opportunity for a young guy to step up, I think that the slightly older guy might still be a little bit of a safer bet. Safety, for instance. There's some excitement about Lewis Seen, excitement held over after another year in the program for Otis Reese. My bet's still on the veteran there, Richard LeCounte. That's an example of that. But one of the things that does put Georgia over the top, though, is the way that you might sprinkle in a Nakobe Dean, his speed in the middle of the defense, making a dynamic play happen. Georgia needs an upgraded pass rush, and on that issue, that's where that youth may play the biggest role. Either guys in the 2018 class who we haven't seen a ton of yet, or 2019 guys who just can't be held off the field. The one place where I think the youth may really rule the day may be at outside linebacker, and then wide receiver may be the next name that you would come up and say that on. Because the honest truth is, if Georgia has a 1,000-yard type receiver this year, I think it's far more likely to come from a freshman than it is anybody else. Jay Wise says the talking season means job security for me. Yeah, that's probably true, Jay. That's probably true. Drew Puckett says after this year, Swift will be in the position where Kirby says you need to go. And, yeah, listen, I don't wish any of these 2017 signees out the door, but I do believe strongly that who you bring into your program is more important than who leaves it. And I don't ever want to be in the position that Georgia was in after the 2016 season where it had to hold on to Chubb and Michelle. It had to hold on to Lorenzo Carter. Had to hold on to Davin Bellamy to have a shot to come back and win the following year. Georgia doesn't make the playoff in 2017 without those seniors. There's no denying that. But in the future, you want five-star high school players to say, oh, and I mean, listen, Kendall Milton said this himself, that he believes that DeAndre Swift is leaving. You want five stars to feel that way about the current juniors because that just keeps the pipeline churning, which is the real way that not just a championship is won, but a string of championships are at least contended for, if not flat out won. John Chappell also mentions Azeez Ojulari. Connor, I know that's a name that you've been keen on. Of all the players who are the least known right now and those who may have a chance to really change that, Azeez could be one of the guys that has the most likely chance of having that happen.
Certainly, yeah. He's a guy who, a season ago missed the entire, or was, rehabbing from an ACL injury, ended up redshirting because of that. Played pretty well in the bowl game, and I think he's one of the guys who, and I've spoken at length, that the Sugar Bowl didn't mean anything, and a lot of players admittedly, checked out and were not all in, locked in on that game. But he's one of the guys who pretty clearly took advantage of that, and it carried over into the spring, and he was getting a lot of first-team reps over guys who were significantly better recruits than him, guys like Brenton Cox, Adam Anderson, even, newcomers like Nolan Smith and Jermaine Johnson. So, I do think that at least says something about Ojulari and where he can be this year. If he's playing over guys like that, that's probably a pretty good sign. He's going to factor into how Georgia's defense performs this year.
Let me get a couple comments here. Steve Banks, first of all, who says, I think we will see that last season's disappointing ending will be good fuel for this season's success. I'm fired up. And, Steve, the person that would join you in saying that is our buddy Mike Johnson, who was a part of a very similar story to Alabama. He's told this story on DawgNation Daily a couple of times. In 2008, at the end of that year, they go to the Sugar Bowl. They get beat by Utah. It was an embarrassing loss for Nick Saban in his second year as Alabama coach. Asked some tough questions about the program. And in response to that, they go out and win the 2009 national championship. So, and Mike will tell you that the loss to Utah focused the team. It made them believe more in what the coaches were saying they needed to do better, and it made them not quite so willing to trust their own talent. They began to trust their development. They began to trust their commitment more so than just what God had given them. And I think that's an important rite of passage for many teams. And it's no guarantee it works out the same way for Georgia, but there's a lot of evidence in sports of disappointment being a precursor to ecstasy and celebration and success. There's a lot of evidence of that. And it could be that for Georgia, the disappointment of 2018 was an important step towards what ultimately is going to happen in 2019. I think that's a fair thing to say. I also want to get Martavius Bankston, who makes an interesting point about the way that Clemson a year ago had a combination of veterans. Remember all those defensive linemen who came back for Clemson for their senior season? That was a real weapon for the Tigers. But in addition to that, there was some young stuff mixed in. There was Justin Ross, the receiver position. You can look at Lynn J. Dixon as a backup running back. Some of the other younger guys they kind of had. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence was a freshman quarterback. You have to mention him in that discussion from a year ago as well. It was kind of that lethal combination of veteran who just is going to dominate his younger opponent and exciting young freshman or exciting young relative newcomer who's going to go out and add a little spice to it. I think Georgia's got itself a pretty good mix of that. And really, Connor, there are probably more freshmen in the mix for playing time right now than I probably thought would have been the case back in January or February. I think there are a few guys who've kind of worked their way in based on the spring for some at least discussion for playing time, probably ahead of what I thought was probably possible for them.
Right. I know Kobe Dean opened a lot of eyes this spring. I think you could certainly say the same for Lewis Seen as well with his performance on G-Day. Coming in, we probably thought the freshmen, you can lump Jermaine Johnson into this as well. The freshmen who were really probably going to contribute the most this year would have been Nolan Smith, Jermaine Johnson, Dominic Blaylock, and George Pickens. But now, there's probably a pretty good chance that number balloons up to 7 or 8 guys. Maybe even later in the season, a guy like Rylan Goody at tight end, given Georgia's depth there. You've got, another tight end, Brett Seether, who's coming in late. This is a deeper class than I think Georgia fans maybe initially realized in terms of which guys might be able to play and contribute right away. And Jeff Santel has pointed out that that's something that Georgia is now looking for when they are recruiting guys. They're no longer really looking for project guys who are going to take 2-3 years to play. Guys like maybe a Wanya Morris, who was a 5-star prospect but wasn't going to be able to contribute right away for Georgia, even if there wasn't incredible depth in front of him. So that's something where, the guys they're targeting, they want guys who are physically going to be able to come in and play right away.
Mike D says he wants to see Georgia put all 5 running backs in the field and use a trick play. Will throw off any defense. All right, let's see. You have to have, 7 guys in the line of scrimmage? Is that right? Is that the rule?
7 guys. 7 guys on the ball.
So that gives you 4 guys left. So you'd have to line up Cook as a wide receiver. You put Kenny McIntosh as a tight end then, and then you put 3 guys in the backfield with Fromm. I wouldn't mind seeing that for play. We've seen some gimmick formations in college football the last couple of years. Didn't Harbaugh and Michigan line up a totally vertical formation last year? So we've seen some gimmick formations. I wouldn't mind seeing Georgia just with a kind of a winking nod towards being RBU to have 5 running backs in the field at one time. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I did talk to Kirby Smart yesterday briefly about James Cook and kind of a private media session that he had with some reporters and goofballs like me before the larger session. I asked him about Cook. I wanted to see how he fits into the discussion at running back right now. And the one thing that he did allude to in that talk is Cook being different than the other backs they have, and also alluding to, therefore, Georgia needed to be creative in how it uses him. So it was interesting to me, Connor, in this, to hear Kirby reflect what is almost a common opinion of Cook, that he's not quite the same thing as Sony Michel. That's a player he's been compared to in the past. He's a little different from that. Sony was a true tailback who just had kind of an extra dimension. Cook may be slightly different than Sony in that regard, and it almost sounded like that Kirby was acknowledging that requires creativity then to really determine how you're going to use Cook there in that.
I mean, I know James Cook is your least favorite Georgia running back.
Don't do
but,
that. Don't do that.
I think the way they're going to use Cook going forward is similar to how Tennessee used Alvin Kamara when he was there. Now, obviously, that didn't excite a lot of fans, but it's sort of he might not be the between the tackles runner that some of the other guys on Georgia's roster is. But in terms of a pass catching threat or a guy you get going, outside sideline to sideline speed, that's I think where you're most likely going to see Cook get used.
But I mean, my memory of all this is, and memories fade over time, is that Tennessee essentially didn't use Alvin Kamara. Now,
Correct.
Once they kicked Jalen Hurd off the team or whatever happened there,
He left voluntarily.
Yeah, he left voluntarily. Or whatever the official word was. They were, I guess, forced to use Kamara more, but when you saw Kamara lighting the world on fire as a rookie with the New Orleans Saints, it's almost like Tennessee fans were even more mad at Butch Jones than ever been before because here's this talent that Tennessee had, and they essentially held that talent hostage by not really using it in the game plan. So I will admit that my fears.
I'm not saying Cook is the same player that Kamara is. I'm just saying that's how he might project to best be used at Georgia.
So here is. I think fear is too strong of a word. I'll say concern instead. Here's my concern. That because it may require creativity to use Cook, therefore he might not get used as much as he possibly could.
Certainly a fair point.
And, we're looking towards a 2020 class where, and these are two very different players, but the point's still the same. We're looking to a 2020 class where a Rick Gilbert is sitting there at Marietta High School saying, hey, I'm a unique athlete as well. I'm a big guy who almost plays a little bit like a wide receiver. Can a team use me creatively? Because you're not going to just put him out there in a typical situation. Gilbert said that's not what he wants. He doesn't want to run the so-called stick routes where you run 5 yards and turn around. He wants to be used creatively. So while a lot of people say how Charlie Werner gets used as a precursor for how a Rick Gilbert might be used, in terms of a willingness to adapt to a philosophy, how James Cook gets used might be more of a clue. Does Georgia have the creativity required to use unique weapons?
Mm-hmm. And, I would add, it is going to be a different offense this year with James Coley. And I think if you look back at what some of the stuff he did at Miami, Duke Johnson was not a big running back, 5'9", 210 pounds, basically the same size as DeAndre Swift. Swift's actually a little bit bigger. But in Johnson's junior season, he had over 1,600 rushing yards, over 400 receiving yards, 2,000 combined total yards. And that was for a team that went 6-7. So, Coley isn't afraid to, go unconventional or use unconventional ways to sort of get the most out of his players. We already know he likes to target tight ends or sort of those bigger body matchup guys. David Njoku, even though he didn't end up playing for Coley, was someone who they brought in under that regime and sort of, laid the groundwork of sort of flexing him out, moving their tight ends around. So I think the important thing to remember when we're talking about, all right, well, how are they going to use Charlie Warner? How are they going to use James Cook? And what does this mean for, future running backs, Tank Bigsby, Eric Gilbert, Darnell Washington, et cetera? Rightfully so, and that's what Gilbert is now doing. He's waiting to see how this new Georgia offense looks with James Coley, and I know that's not exactly the most fun point to make during talking season, but I think that's the kind of thing we have to do with this offense now that it is under new management.
So a slight pet peeve of mine. I think everything you just said about James Coley and his track record prior to being the Georgia offensive coordinator now is accurate. However, when you look at Jim Chaney, it's fair to point out that Chaney's play calling history prior to Georgia was a good bit different than it was in his 3 years on the job at Georgia, which leads you to believe that Kirby Smart had a specific way he wanted the offense to operate, and he told Chaney kind of how he wanted that to be. That I've always been of the belief that some of the things that people might want to blame on Chaney might actually rest more at the feet of Kirby Smart because Chaney was executing the offensive plan that Kirby Smart had. So when James Coley comes in as offensive coordinator, we've heard Charlie Warner say this, that he thinks that that Warner believes that Coley is a little bit more pass-oriented than Chaney might be. And you say, well, you look back at his time at Miami, the way that he got tight ends involved there in that offense. I mean, at one point in time, Jim Chaney was also a guy that was coaching Drew Brees, a very different kind of offense than the one that he ran at Georgia. I think a lot of this stuff ends up being a Kirby Smart issue of how creative is Kirby Smart willing to let his offense be at Georgia? Is he willing to let some fun things be added in? or does he just want to dominate with big offensive linemen and really good running backs, which has been a great recipe for regular season success, but is kind of stalled out in fourth quarters against Alabama in games that have mattered most of all? To me, this becomes an issue of Kirby Smart. Are you willing to let the offensive coordinator try some things? And by try some things, I don't mean read options with a running quarterback one time a game.
Right. And I think if you look at what Saban did, I think when that Alabama program got its second win was when Saban took his hands off the theoretical steering wheel of that offense. Lane Kiffin running up-tempo style. He let Mike Loxley run what he ran last year, which is very different than what Saban was running at the beginning of his tenure. And, I did this small thing yesterday when Andrew Thomas was talking about some of the things they were working on getting better on this offseason. Talked a lot about zone blocking techniques, and that might not mean a whole lot, but Georgia, to your point, is basically, when they came in under Kirby, he wanted a man-on-man dominate, and that's why that offensive line was so bad in 2016. Because they just didn't have the personnel to do that under Richt and Bobo. It was more of a zone scheme. So, maybe that leads me to believe that Georgia might be integrating some more, some newer, some different concepts than what we saw under Chaney and Kirby, as you point out, in the last couple of seasons at Georgia.
Vernon Luzie, you're checking out of the program. He's got to get back to work. Vernon, we appreciate you being a part of this today. I hope it was fun for you. Joel Moody and Matt Rukavina asking a couple of recruiting questions. Let's deal with those. Joel brings up Noah Sewell and the chances that Georgia gets him. I obviously have no inside information on this, but I'm typically of the belief that when an unusual player gets talked about this much, there's usually a reason why. Let's face it, Sewell from the state of Utah and the kind of guy that has typically played west of the Mississippi, when that guy is mentioned as prominently around Georgia as he is, Jeff's written about him now, I think, a pretty good bit. There's usually something to that for me. We don't cover all prospects equally. We don't cover all recruits evenly. So the fact that you've seen Sewell's name pop up, or Sewell, however you say it, the fact that you've seen it pop up as much as it has probably means something. Matt Rukavina also asking about the running back situation. Is this a package deal involving Tank Bigsby and Kendall Milton? Milton is the one that I feel the strongest about. I expect on July 29th, when Milton makes his college announcement, I expect it's going to be George. I'll be surprised if it's not. In terms of the other running back to go with him, I think Tank Bigsby's a really good name to put there. It seems like there's been a little bit of movement in regards to that. Obviously, Milton's had some nice things to say about Tank as of late, but he also seemingly has a relationship with Marshawn Lloyd, the South Carolina commit. At this point in time, I've kind of put Zachary Evans on the back burner. At one point in time, I thought that was probably more real than I think it is now. But these things have a way of changing. If my opinion changes, I'll be sure to mention that. As it stands right now, I've kind of put Evans on the back burner. But between Lloyd and Bigsby, I won't pretend to know Georgia's thinking on this. I certainly don't believe that Lloyd's status as a South Carolina commit makes that an ungettable get for Georgia. If Georgia wants Lloyd, it can get Lloyd, and they'll just tell South Carolina to kick rocks. They can't always do that with every position, but with a running back, given South Carolina's lack of success and Georgia's prominent success, I believe they can. I don't know which of these two backs Georgia favors, though, between Lloyd and Bigsby, but I do believe it may be between those two to be the next big guy.
I would probably agree with that, and I do wonder, if and when Kendall Milton does commit to Georgia, July 29th is when that is when he is expected to announce his commitment. I do wonder if that shifts where Georgia goes in terms of going after Lloyd or going after Bigsby, because at that point they will have their one big fish in the boat, and they will be, essentially having a known quantity that maybe that makes it a little bit more, all right, do we lean more, do we put more into getting Lloyd, or do we put more into getting Bigsby? And, flipping Lloyd from South Carolina, Kirby's talked in the past about how he doesn't like having two flip guys. But I do think that
just
Georgia
hates it. Yeah, he hates it.
You just hate to see it.
There's another coach on the other side of that flip. He's told us that before.
I do think that Georgia's going to make Georgia's still making an effort to land Milton. They've stayed in contact with him.
You mean Lloyd?
Or Lloyd, yes. Well, they have with Milton as well.
Right, yeah. Yes.
So, I think it's just sort of a wait-and-see game, and sort of I think what's going to precipitate all this sort of movement is actually whenever Bigsby decides he wants to go through and make his final decision. And if he says he has a date and he wants to commit and get it done before his senior season. I wonder if that forces Georgia's hand, or vice versa, wherever he may want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that you take a guy like Tank Bigsby, and I hate to be just cutting to the chase here. This is the impolite part of recruiting talk. If Bigsby called up Del McGee right now, or called up Kirby Smart right now, and said, "Hey, I'm ready to put out my edit. I'm ready to put out my video. I'm coming to Georgia on July, whatever the date this is, 17th."
Mm-hmm.
Is Georgia accepting that commitment today? I honestly will have to say I just don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they want to see what Milton ends up doing, and if he does pick Georgia, and our indications are that Georgia is a school he's very much considering. I wonder how much that shapes what they do at running back, because there's theoretically a world where Milton picks Ohio State, and Georgia could just then say, go to Bigsby and Milton, hey, I know you've talked about playing at South Carolina. Why don't you come do that at Georgia instead?
Bigsby and Lloyd, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
too many names, too many 6-letter names.
I mean, the one thing I do believe is, one way or another, Georgia wants, if Milton picks Georgia, I think Georgia wants Milton to have his chance to be the first back in this class, because there's a lot of excitement about a big running back committing. So if a back commits before Milton, he almost steals some of Milton's thunder if Milton were then to follow up on that. So I think Georgia wants, assuming Milton gives the Dogs good news, they want him to have his day in the sun first. And then after that, they will do what they will. But I still am a big believer that one way or another, Georgia wants the two backs in this class just to kind of make sure that position stays as deep as it needs to be. So we shall see. C. Hill says if he doesn't think Milton's going to Ohio State. If he doesn't choose UGA, he's going to LSU or Alabama. In terms of who would be more likely to take the silver medal, though, I mean, for me, just based on the chatter that came out of the Columbus visit, I'd have a hard time believing that Ohio State's not at least in second place on this, ahead of likely LSU or Alabama. I have, for the life of me, no idea how LSU, after taking two big backs a year ago, could still have kind of a primary position with Evans or Milton or any of these guys. I mean, listen, Orgeron's doing a good job of recruiting, but they just signed two freshman backs who are going to get a lot of playing time this year.
Credit Coach O and that gumbo down there at LSU football.
I don't know.
Just going to run the ball and lose to Alabama by 30 points and go 10-2, but lose another game they shouldn't. Go Coach O. Go Tigers.
I don't know. That's not a great Orgeron impression. Now, I say that as someone who can barely do my own voice. That's not a great Orgeron voice. J.J. McMillan says, could Sewell play defensive line? He almost could have been. And I guess at one point in time, given how big he is, I'm sure defensive line was a conversation. But once you realize how fast he runs, at that point in time, you don't want to waste that speed on the defensive line. You want to give him some space to run around. But, given Sewell's overall size, he's nearly 270 pounds as a high school player. Given his overall size, I mean, defensive line could have at one point been the conversation on that.
Yeah, Sewell's made it a point to say, no, I want to play linebacker at the next level. So.
Yeah. So that's for sure. Jennifer Caldwell.
You got people saying it was funny. They liked it.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's that bad. I credit for trying. I'm not criticizing you. Jennifer Caldwell Sperlin says, what about Cedric Von Prawn? Is there a commitment date for that? I haven't heard anything new on him. Maybe we'll ask Jeff about that today. But I'm guessing, just based on some of the chatter I've heard, that Georgia fans still feel pretty good about Van Prawn. But I don't really know. Where all this stands now.
Yeah, with Van Prawn, I believe he is set to visit Georgia that last week in July when it is a contact period. Georgia plans to have a number of big-time visitors that weekend. I believe Darnell Washington has talked about coming then. Keely Ringo, 5-star cornerback, is supposed to be in Athens that day. There's some wonder about, does Arik Gilbert come that weekend? So I think that weekend and who is at Georgia that weekend is going to be a very telling weekend of who Georgia really wants to get in their 2019 class, and thus who is also very much considering going to Georgia in this 2019 class. And then, 2 days later, Fresno, California, Kendall Milton is set to make his announcement. So that, 3-4 days should tell us a lot about how the rest of this 2020 recruiting class lines up.
Yeah, Connor's getting more credit for the Orgeron impression than I thought he might. That's kind of nice.
You're a
to
harsh
see.
critic.
I guess so. All right, we've got to get ready to get off the air. Connor, any final thoughts from you here today?
Should we be worried about Tennessee with Jeremy Pruitt just going up there and filibustering for 21 minutes? I know they've got your second favorite quarterback in Jarek Arantano.
Please stop that. I think it's really weird that Pruitt didn't want to talk yesterday because it seems like there's not that much bad stuff going around that he should want to duck it. Now, I will say I thought there was an interesting moment, and I should get credit here for not trying to throw gasoline on this fire. But so he's talking about Bryce Thompson, who he actually called Bryce Ramsey, which I thought was kind of funny.
Former punter. Bryce Ramsey.
Yeah. Bryce Thompson, a high school quarterback, who they're playing as a defensive back. Alontae Taylor, former wide receiver, they're playing as a defensive back. And Pruitt said from the podium in the basically the TV room yesterday that I love recruiting offensive players and putting them on defense. If I was Georgia, and there are reasons why I'm not, but if I was in charge of their Twitter, social media stuff for recruiting, I would take, how like they do the cool edits of like good Georgia stuff and like they send it to recruits. I'd take a picture of Pruitt talking with that eyebrow raised, and I'd put that quote over it. I like to take offensive players and put them on defense, and I'd send that to Rick Gilbert and say, this guy wants you. He tells you he's going to put you at wide receiver.
Defensive end.
He's going to play you defensive end if you go there. Because I thought that was a little bit of a tell from Pruitt yesterday. By the way,
also one final thing. People asking, is SEC Media Days fun? I will say no, it is not fun. Sports writers are not a great group of people.
You're kind of a sneaky old man a little bit, though. It can be fun. It can be fun. SEC Media Days in small doses can be fun.
I think 16 hours is a little too much of a dose.
Yeah, yesterday was a long day. Oh, by the way, one more thing before we go. I'm actually going to give a free plug, which is something I never do. I came within an eye, and if the football talk is over, so if this bores you, we'll see tomorrow. But I'll be quick on this, then we're going to get out the door. I had one goal in mind yesterday, and I kind of vaguely referenced this on Monday. I wanted to kind of hit for the chicken triple crown on the way home or the chicken cycle, whatever you want to call it, because my 3 favorite fast food restaurants are all chicken themed. I do like Chick-fil-A, I like Popeyes, and I like Bojangles. And my plan was maybe do a Bojangles for breakfast. I don't always love mall Chick-fil-A's, to be honest with you.
A real quote that came out of his mouth yesterday.
I feel like the freestanding Chick-fil-A's are usually better than the mall Chick-fil-A's, but I knew there was one there in the Winfrey Mall, whatever it's called, and I was going to try to do Popeyes on the way home. So I knocked off the Bojangles for breakfast. It was fantastic, driving down to Hoover. Chick-fil-A launched yesterday. Credit to that mall Chick-fil-A. They were on their A game yesterday. And on the way home, I had a chance to stop at Popeyes. But the Popeyes was in Talladega, Alabama. So while I was there, my son's a huge racing fan. So while I was there, I said, well, let me go past Popeyes for a moment. The track's just right here. I'm going to go take a picture of the track and send it to my son. So come to find out, the track was a little farther away, and by the time I got to it, I was already 2 miles away from Popeyes, so I couldn't circle back. So I didn't get my Triple Crown yesterday. But I did eat Bojangles for dinner. So I went Bojangles breakfast, Chick-fil-A lunch, Bojangles dinner.
You went home run, triple home run.
I did. But I almost had a chance to do, and I don't think I've ever done this before, Bojangles breakfast, Chick-fil-A lunch, Popeyes dinner. That would have been a great day. Mm-hmm. A great day. Not for the arteries, but for everything else. So that's enough.
Dapper Dan and C. Hill both point out you left off the best chicken restaurant. That would be Raising Cane's.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. To each his own, I guess, when it comes to that. By the way, I'd love to invite you to go to AJC.com. Get your Atlanta news now there. There's a weird story coming out of St. Simon's, a beach that I love. A lot of whales have been showing up beached on the shore there. That's not typically an Atlantic story. Some of that kind of stuff happens on the Gulf Coast from time to time with sea life, but not always on the Atlantic coast. So kind of a weird thing going on there in St. Simon's. You can check that out. And also a really weird, sad story involved after a bicyclist was hit by a woman on Roswell Road. So a lot of news breaking around Atlanta every single day, and you can get your updates throughout the day at AJC.com. So go to AJC.com to get your Atlanta news now. Also, huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews Cool Down possible. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. They play all those positions for us here at DawgNation, but this time of year, it may be the air conditioning you're thinking most about, and that $99 Smiley tune-up from my friends at R.S. Andrews will get your system back to factory fresh specs. Check that out, and we'll check you out tomorrow back here at 10 a.m. for another episode of DawgNation Daily. Hope you have a great day. Look forward to seeing you then and this afternoon at 3 p.m. for Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Myself, Jeff Sentell. We'll do a little recruiting talk. So stay close to DawgNation. We got a lot of stuff coming in the days ahead, including tomorrow, right back here on our program.